Hello and welcome to another episode of me talking to myself about philosophical questions, at least. That makes it a little less boring or crazy to look at. By the way, during the Corona crisis, I rarely use the bus, and I haven't used the bus for a long time. Are there still those people on the buses who talk to themselves? I have the feeling that in my childhood and when I was a teenager studying, on my way to university, I always saw people talking to themselves on the bus. It was quite fascinating, but I don't know if they still do that or if they have taken the turn to the internet now and type things into commentary sections. It sometimes feels like they are talking to themselves. You know the rules. I have a list of 205 philosophical questions. The link is in the description, and I will use the Google number randomizer to find a number between 1 and 205. Today it's number 2. Let's see what question number 2 is. Is free will real or just an illusion? Oh gee, yeah, that's I will try to keep it short, like 5 minutes or something like that. Free will. When I first heard people discussing that in a theological sense, or in a biological sense, usually it was in discussions between theologists talking about God and atheists talking about science. And the question of free will came up very often. And I thought, what's the deal with it? Of course I have free will. Free willy. I know what I want, and I can choose, and so on. No, okay, here's the point. If you're a religious person, there's the question, does God watch over you? Does God control what you're doing, maybe? And does God lead you? The good people are, at God's hand, and the bad people, are running away from God and doing things, but it's never free will. It's either God or the devil. Let's not talk about that, okay? Religion is an interesting topic in itself, but more interesting to me is the question of free will in a scientific worldview. If we are a brain inside a body that has evolved from other animals in the past, do we have a free will, or do we just follow our instincts? Because with animals, I think there's good reason to think that an animal usually follows its instincts. That's why you can trap mice in a mouse trap, which is quite sad, and kill animals when you are hunting them, because you know how they will react to certain things. Hunters can use sprays or traps or sounds, to lure animals towards them. The lower on the evolutionary scale an animal is, the more simple its brain is, the more you can predict what the animal is going to do. So if you go fishing, it's quite easy. You put a worm on a hook and throw it into the water, and the fish will come. But with humans, we like to think that we are not like that, right? We like to think that we are very, very intelligent, and and there's a difference, of course, between us and regular animals, let's say. We have, at least we can prove that we have the ability to look into the past and into the future in our mind, making plans and learning from our experiences in a very complex way. Not only from our experiences, but we can learn from the experiences of other people. We can read books about what people did in the Middle Ages and learn from that. You would agree, even if you're the biggest animal fan alive, that animals probably can't do that to that extent. Animals can learn something, yes, but in a very limited extent, right? Humans have that, so humans are different, and we're talking about this. I'm on the internet now. That was invented, and so we should think that we are very clever, and we can think about thinking. And so we are not slaves to our instincts. We can do what we want. We are free to do what we want. Probably in the limits of social rules, right? I know I can go out and kill someone, but I won't, because there's the police, and maybe I don't hate anyone, so I won't do it. That's not what's meant by free will, right? The fact that I can't take certain drugs, or I can't steal stuff, the concept of stealing. Well, that's just social rules. But the question in a philosophical way is usually, when I buy something legally, do I buy it of my own free will because I said, oh, I want that, so I buy it? Or is it just a connection of my needs, things that I really need, my experiences, things that are good, and advertising, the will of other people being put into my mind? And some people would argue that it's just as easy to sell us a new car or a new mobile phone as it is to hook a fish. Is that true? Do we all fall for the same tricks of advertising and commercials? Are we just like fish in the water waiting for the hook to grab? I don't think so. But that's an opinion. We would have to check that. Since I don't want to make this too long, let me come to the conclusionary point. Maybe everything every person ever does is just the sum of processes, of instincts, needs, ideas, experiences, the will of others, and the rules we follow. And maybe it's you could take that apart, and it's very complex, and we shouldn't call it free will because there's no will. There's only us reacting to impulses the way we should react. But my opinion is that these connections of these impulses are so complex that we should call it will. And yes, I think we have a free will. Maybe it just means that sometimes we don't even think too much about it. We just follow our instincts, or the next time we ignore our instincts and do the exact opposite, and there's an element of will in there. You could take it apart and say, oh no, that's because of this and that's because of that, but it would be so complex that it's no use, and we should call it free will. And to end on the religious note that I started with, for the same reason, I think it's okay to talk about God, even as an atheist. Because, in the best sense, God could just be a description of very complex things in our world that we could take apart and discuss and so on, but in the end, for simple people and people like me, sometimes it's better to say, thank God this happens. Does that mean that I believe in a God that created the universe or makes certain rules we have to follow, who to marry and when to pray and what to eat? No. But in the end, God could be just as good an explanation for the complex connections of things, that makes it easier to talk about and think about stuff as free will is. So maybe free will and God are just words that we can use to describe very, very complex things. And this is not really new. This is not really special. This is what we do all the time, I think. But what do you think? I would love to hear from you, read from you, and for you to take part in this discussion if it's interesting for you. See you next time.